Hello, my name is Rich, and you are watching the Indie Plus Pound Game Night event for May 2014. This is a panel, an online hangout panel that we are hosting, and the name of the panel is How to Create easy for me to say, How to Create Interesting Characters. Now, this event upholds the Indie Plus community standards. To find out more about those standards, Google for Indie Plus community standards. Please be aware that this event may include discussions or descriptions of explicit but probably not abusive language. I have a wonderful group of panelists on, and I have some very cool intros, so I want you to get to know them here as I bring them on one by one. First of all, we have Dana Freed, the producer of iPodcast Magic Missile and co-designer of the upcoming Ace Pilot military drama RPG, Souls of Steel. Dana helped bring indie gaming to the New River Valley and has extensive experience as a GM and player in both home and convention games. Welcome to the panel, Dana. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I muted myself. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kira Magrann, is a queer cyborg from Columbus, Ohio, who strives to create inclusiveness for women and LB. Do it! I knew it was going to blow the acronym. Yes, LBEC Gamers through her work with indie games on demand, story games forums, and the international award-winning blog Gaming as Women. Welcome, Kira.
Hey.
Megan Pedersen has spent many moons studying and performing theater and improvisation at venerable Chicago institutions such as Improv Olympic, the Annoyance Theater, Artistic Home, and the Playground, and has spent over a decade creating characters on stage as an... What is that?
An ecdesiast. It's a fancy... Yes, it's a fancy word for burlesque performer.
That's awesome. Welcome, Megan. Thanks for coming on. And next we have Stras Acimovic, is a 4th-level programmer and 7th-level world traveler currently delving dungeons in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's written several scenarios and adventures for published games, has playtest credits in a wide variety of products, and is acting as a consulting designer on several upcoming RPG products, blogs on G+, and at www.platonic-solids.com. Welcome, Stras.
Good to be here.
Good. So we have an established group, and hopefully Rachel Walton is able to join us. I'll go ahead and give the intro if she's able to join. We were having some problems getting her onto the Hangout tonight. I'm pretty sure it's my fault. Rachel is an artist from Philadelphia, a longtime GM and story gamer, and designer of the upcoming space horror RPG, The Long Orbit. So hopefully she's able to join us. So we have some questions that we've received from the followers of Indie Plus ahead of time. However, we do have the Q&A enabled. So if you are viewing this live through YouTube or through the Hangout link on the Google Plus page, please do reach out and ask some questions. Otherwise, we will queue up the questions that we have. Now, the questions we received before the panel, we're talking about making characters, right? How to make a really great player character for a tabletop RPG, for those who didn't know with my very brief intro on what we're actually talking about. But we received kind of 2 groups worth of questions, so we're going to kind of lead off with the character generation questions. And hopefully, panelists, if you don't mind, I'll ask the question and we'll do a little of popcorn to start off with as we kind of lay the groundwork here. Jennifer Martin asked, how do you decide who or what you want to play?
Oh, or should we just start answering?
Yeah, please do.
Sure. For me, that depends what game I'm playing, right? I'll want to play a character that is interesting in the game and significant to the game that I'm about to sit down and play. So, if I'm playing Dream Askew, which is about playing queer people in the post-apocalypse, then I'm going to want to create a queer character who has some interesting story and connections to other characters in the game, right? So that's kind of the first thing that I think about is how do I fit into this game? How do I fit into the setting? What are my relationships with the other characters? Kind of basic stuff.
I think, to be honest with you, everybody, so the traditional way you would do that is you look at what mechanics are available, right? A lot of the times you'll end up... people can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
So the old traditional game way, you look at what classes are available, or in an Apocalypse World game, you look at what splats are available. But there's two things that I like to do that sort of go above and beyond that, right? I want to find things that are compelling to me, but the two things that I do, I have oftentimes, I will look for an issue that I want to explore through the character, or an experience that I want to have through the character, and I'll use that as the seed for the character. The second thing I do more in traditional games is I try to come up with a high concept for the character that has nothing to do with game mechanics. And I can give examples of either of these if people are interested in hearing. So for issue exploration, I've been playing a lot with gender lately, as you might imagine. And so the Monster Hearts character for the AP that we did is an exploration of sort of traditional notions of masculinity. And I really wanted to try that because it's something that's a little bit alien to me. The second character was sort of a letting go of male privilege. So Grace is entirely powerless. And I actually worked that out with the GM ahead of time because I realized there could be some problematic material there. And I thought that was a really fascinating... They both turned out into really sort of fascinating, rewarding characters. As for high concept, I had a D&D game where I came up with wizard, building contractor, and family man. And then, of course, you go and you look for mechanics that do that for you. Or vampire tentacle monster with severe social anxiety. And then you go and look for concepts, your character builds that will do that for you, too. So, that sort of thing. Anyway.
Yeah, for me, personally, the two areas that I like to explore when I game are what it is to be female, and also what it is to be sane or insane, just because they're both personal sort of touch points for me. So a lot of times if there's not a lot of lead-in, like if I don't know we're going to play a game and, I'm sort of creating something in character generation organically, those are the two areas that I go to first to think about what it is that I want to play in that game and what's most appropriate for that game. Because, like we said before, it really kind of depends on the game what you're going to play. If I have a little bit more lead time, like if I know we're going to start playing a campaign of this or that, sometimes I will go on the internet and do some research and find things I think that are cool that would add a lot to the group and add a lot to the setting. I've done that for Western games. I've done that for the game that the Jankcast did of Apocalypse World, which you can find online, where we played people on Zeppelins. I decided that I wanted to do like a Peter Pan Sky Pirate kind of thing. But it took me a few days to kind of figure out what it was exactly that meant.
And that's the Black Diamond sessions from the Jankcast. You owe it to yourself to listen to that. Even if you don't like AP, a recorded AP, you're going to find out that you like this. That was really, really great.
Yeah, thanks.
I think, of course, anytime you talk about what you want to play, it's going to depend on the game. But in general, deciding what I want to play, I find that most of the time I really enjoy... I like playing pretty much anything in a given game. If I don't like some stuff, I can usually find something fun about every character class or every particular build or whatever. So I tend to AP a little bit. So my secret to finding what I want to play is I usually let the rest of the group pick, and then I either take something that's not already present or something that reinforces or helps out or somehow ties everything together. So that's one of the tricks that I use myself. Let's see. The other thing that I try to do is I try to break stereotypes. So, like, if you're going to make a fighter or something, like a wizard, of course, I don't want to let my group down and be a shoddy fighter or a shoddy wizard, but I always try and put some sort of spin on it, maybe add something a little bit unusual, come at it from a different angle, maybe come from an unusual race combo, or try and work some things into my backstory that change things up. So a lot of times by creating those offbeats, your character gains a little bit of uniqueness, and that's something that I kind of like mixing into characters. So when picking characters I like, that's what I do. I tend to look for things that the group needs, things that tie the group together, and I try to look for something that's a little offbeat.
So, Stras, just to follow up, when you say what the group needs, just so I'm clear, do you mean like mechanically, niche-wise, or from a personality construct?
That's actually a good question. It depends on what we're playing, right? Obviously, like if we're playing, I don't know, some sort of D&D game, and the party has nobody to stand on the front line. Obviously, that's what I'm going to do. So that's a mechanical perspective. But there's a lot of times where, so for example, we were playing an archipelago game. So let's talk like totally story game, right? And we were setting up a small town in the middle of like nowhere, USA. And so one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of the people were designing characters that had a lot of power in town. So a person was playing somebody that owned a business. There was somebody who was on the town council and things like that. So one of the things that I did was I decided to make somebody who was a waitress. So it was somebody who like countered the power dynamic and added something so that we could see actions of the other. Like it wasn't going to be a game about politics. It was going to be about small town life. So I felt that the group needed something like that in order to provide a different perspective and also to create a very different balance. So that question is not always obvious. Like if you have classes and you have set roles, obviously that's a mechanistic question. But a lot of times I try and look at it sort of like what the story is lacking, like something that helps provide a different angle that would otherwise not be present. So
Great, thanks. Did anyone else have any follow-up on the contrarian character? Okay, cool. Zach Smith had a question. How could a character possibly be uninteresting? Kira, why don't you lead off with that?
How could a character be uninteresting? Well, if you create a character that's, I'd say, purposely oppositional to everything that the players are doing or the story is telling, I'd say that that's pretty uninteresting. You're not a part of the group, and therefore you don't get to actually see or hear what your character is about. So I'd say that that's fairly uninteresting.
And just so the contrarian Strash, I'm sorry, that was maybe a little more negative than I meant. I meant
don't worry about it. It's
a
cool.
counterpoint character.
I know, it's fine. I know what you meant.
Cool. Megan, how could a character be uninteresting? Any other ways that we can avoid playing uninteresting characters?
Well, first and foremost, if what you're playing is uninteresting to you, you've got no stakes in it. So bringing it to the table means that you're not going to put any sort of effort into making the relationships or exploring the depth of that particular character. So you have to have some stakes in what you're doing. If what you've put together doesn't have anything that really gets to you, that really has any hooks in you, then you're not gonna. It's not going to be that great to sit at the table and play for 4 hours as. So I mean that to me would be the biggest thing. You have to individually have a stake in it.
Marshall Miller had a follow-up to Zach's question that I think is interesting. Or using the word interesting. But Zach had asked, how could a character possibly be uninteresting? And Marshall asked, interesting for whom?
Ooh, can I tackle that one?
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, so part of my interesting question response is that you have to look at character interest from, there's kind of 3 separate angles. There is a character that might be really interesting for you to play, but may not be that interesting for a GM to have in a game, if the game has a GM. And it might also not be terribly interesting for other people at a table. So in order to answer the question of what makes a character uninteresting, you have to kind of look at it from any one of those points of view. So one of the things that I always tell my players and generally try to do as a person is Wolverine-type characters, like the brooding loner type, is not terribly interesting for anyone other than potentially you. So, like, as a player, you might have written a 16-page backstory and be totally into, like, what your background is, but if you're not communicating that at the table and you're not showing it, you're not acting it out, that's not part of the group story, then nobody else is going to be intrigued. And there are certain characters that are certainly, like, if you don't provide hooks for the GM and the GM keeps throwing plot at you and you're just not interested, then that's probably not interesting for the GM. The other problem is players that don't share the spotlight really well. So like this is the classic. I mean, I love playing deckers in Shadowrun, but nobody else likes having a decker in their group because they go off and they do their own thing. So that's something to watch for too. So
Yeah, Dana.
Can I add to that? So I think you hit on a really good thing there, which is there's what some people call defensive play, which often comes from, the abused gamer syndrome, people who have had to like protect their characters from GMs that want to just wreck them all the time, and like basically not having any points of contact that other characters connect to you. Never mind not actively connecting to other characters, which I think is also really important. Is a great way to make your character uninteresting to everyone else at the table and to you too. And if it doesn't come out in the fiction, it doesn't exist. So that's the thing to keep remembering. The 16 pages of backstory doesn't do you any good if you don't read that 16 pages of backstory to everyone else at the table, because then you've written yourself a nice little novel and you can go off in the corner and read your little novel.
Yeah, I would follow up with, your character has to have relationships, whether they be big relationships or small relationships with the other players at the table. That's what drives dramatic situations. If you are playing in a vacuum, if you're playing the loner, like Stras was saying, you've got nothing. You're in a bubble. And that makes you uninteresting to everybody else. There's nothing for them to interact with. There's nothing for them to fight against or engage with. And so even if it's not a big relationship, that's what's going to make everybody else interested in being with your person in that game.
And further than that, you want to go a step further, I think, actually. You want to actively use your character to highlight the other characters at the table. And what I mean by that is, figure out what relationships you have with them, figure out how you feel towards them, decide you like a character because rivalry is easy, you can just snipe at each other. Decide you like someone, even if it's someone that you shouldn't. And explore what that means, explore why that is, and then decide every session, I'm going to highlight this aspect of their character, I'm going to dig a little deeper here. You pull the interesting parts of their character out at the same time as you expose the interesting parts of your own. So I think it's a force multiplier.
Very cool, very cool. We have a question from someone currently watching the Hangout, Dwayne Padilla. How do you approach qualities you might find repulsive in real life, issues of sexism, racism, etc.? Do you find them interesting to play, or something that can be learned from, or are they something you choose to avoid?
Ooh, that's hard. Actually, I can jump on that if nobody else.
You went first 2 times in a row.
You're right. That's actually 3 times in a row.
it's okay, Kira. If you got something, go with it. Otherwise,
Go.
Okay, I got it. So I was I've been GMing Night Witches, which is about female pilots in World War II, and part of that is to present an opposition to them, which means kind of being like sometimes a sexist douchebag, power mongering asshole, and that's hard for me to do because I'm a feminist and I'm queer, and I understand how to do it, right? Everybody does, but that's part of like being a GM, is playing characters who are oppositional to the PCs, which I think is actually just as important when you're saying I'm playing a character, because NPCs are characters too. And so, like, when exploring those things and playing NPCs, that's really hard. Sometimes I'm like, this is a horrible thing I'm about to do. I'm going to ask everyone's permission first if it's okay to do this horrible thing, because actually it makes me uncomfortable. And get everyone's permission and agency first. Have safety outs in play if it goes as far as that. What's that?
I said that's really important.
It's super important. I mean, like the X card. Some people know what that is, or just having some kind of safety mechanism in play that everybody's safe with that. Get everyone's permission before you start playing a radical, violent, misogynistic asshole. That everyone is okay with that level of horribleness. That it's not going to trigger anybody. That it might upset somebody to talk about serious violent issues, or even just have power play in the game. So like at that level, make sure that everyone else is cool with it. And on another level, make sure you're okay with it. And on a third level, sometimes it's cool to explore that stuff. I mean, sometimes we want to tell stories about bad guys, and if that bad guy is an NPC, it's easier to call that person a bad guy, or girl, or person. But you know, if it's your player character, it's a little harder because you're getting into like Clockwork Orange territory. Like this is the anti-hero. I'm a moody vampire and I do horrible things, but I'm really, you know, the main character. And somehow you have to kind of work in reasons why those things are happening. You can't just like not justify it. So you have to really think about those characters. I think they're harder. I think it actually is a type of like edge play as far as like role-playing games go. Like I think it's like second level. Like if you're gonna play bad guys or assholes, I think it takes a little bit more finesse and safety.
And there are some games, I'm thinking of Misspent Youth is one of them. Sorry about that. Cat.
All right. Cat sighting.
Cat sighting. Sorry, guys. I warned us at the beginning. Misspent Youth, part of the mechanic at the very beginning during the world generation and character generation is as a group, everyone contributes and talks about the things that really bother them about bullies, about sexism and racism and authoritarianism. And I think even if you're a player and not the GM, if that's something that you're going to want to add into the world, character generation and world generation is a great time to bring it up and discuss it, and everybody can kind of have some feedback into how that's going to affect the game. And just like you're saying, check in and that kind of thing, but it can also be part of creating that game space at the very beginning.
Totally, and at the beginning too, you can set the dial on that, right? There's like there's violence you see on TV, and then there's you know, very extreme violence that you might see in real life, and both of those things are different in how you describe them and how they're dealt with. So setting that dial, I think, is important too, of how evil your person is or how violent the story is.
And if you're not comfortable playing a monster, don't. There's someone at your table who is and will, if that's something you need in your game. We're playing The Sword, the Crown, and the Unspeakable Power right now, and I'm the MC, and I have no need to create horrible NPCs because my players are doing just fine on their own.
Stras, you said earlier that you might have an answer for this one. Did you have a different take?
Not sure about this one specifically, but yeah, sure. I think that so role-playing in general is about becoming different people, and I find that many role-playing games actually are a discussion of, in some fashion, discussions of ethics, right? Like, what are you willing to do in a specific scenario? And I think that if you think about it from that particular perspective, it's not unusual that sometimes people want to ask questions that the answer should be obvious in real life. Like, I mean, I don't know about anybody else's group, but most of the people that I game with are pretty decent people. So it's very unlikely that when confronted with a scenario, they're going to react with, you know, really kind of a dark take on things. And there are certain games where some of this stuff is really integrated into the game itself. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of trad games like Warhammer where when you're playing the good guys, it might mean wiping out entire villages because somebody came up corrupted. So, you know. But yeah, the fact of the matter is that what's really important is that everyone has buy-in, right? You want your tables to be having fun and not necessarily, like, I mean, it's fun to get scared, and it's fun sometimes to see where the dark path leads in a safe environment, because it's like a roller coaster where, you know, you're putting your toe over the edge there, and as long as everyone's on board and everyone's cool with it, I think it's fine. You're going to have to gauge what you like and what you don't like about yourself, and it's important to note that there's no dare. So if you try a character and you go a little bit darker than you necessarily want, you can always talk to the GM and the other players and kind of back off the next session. So, yeah. I mean, role-playing can mean a lot of things to a lot of different groups. Some groups just want, you know, 4-color supers and punching, and that's fine. But if you want to explore dark territory, that happens, and that's cool, and as long as everyone's on board.
Cool. Thanks, Stras. Dana, I want to lead off with you. This question is from Jason Morningstar. How do you telegraph what you want out of a play experience through the process of creating a character? And I think we've already touched on this a little bit. Maybe you can dial it in for us.
So, two things I'm going to say. First, I'm going to say is deeper in the game, that's Chris Chin, right?
Yes.
He has great posts on flags and flag framing, and you should just go read those before you listen to anything I say right now. Well, not before, because pause YouTube, go read those, and come back. The second thing I want to say is, again, if you want to explore an issue, if there's something you really are interested in getting to with a character, talk to your GM, talk to the other players. I said to the GM of the last Apocalypse World game I played in, I said, I want you to abuse me. Show me what it's like, and they did, and it was a real intense experience. But more than that, create obvious hooks, create obvious points of contact for your character. I have a family, I have children, I live in an unsafe place. Well, now clearly that's an issue I want to explore because I'm just putting that out there for somebody else to mess with, that sort of thing. But really, just talk about it in the meta. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of metagaming, especially for indie story game type stuff, really.
Anyone else have some telegraphing techniques that they use?
Are you looking for specific techniques, or are you looking in general?
Specific techniques. Let's get specific. What do you do?
Okay, so obviously one thing that Dana said that I agree with 100% is say it. People are not psychic, so you can hint at it a whole bunch, but people may not catch on or understand what your hints are meaning, so always say it. But I think in terms of meta techniques, a lot of things are like flags like that oftentimes appear in games, and the games provide the mechanism for you. You see like bonds, questionnaires. One of the things you might do is do like shared world building, or maybe apply destinies from Archipelago. So.
Kira, any techniques that you have? I mean, let's step back. I think that a lot of the story games we're talking about kind of solve for some of the issues.
Yeah.
So let's just assume that I'm walking into a con to play a one-shot of something I'm going to grab off the shelf at a friendly local game store that hasn't already tried to solve for these issues. What are some techniques that I can have when I'm not the GM, right? And there's this kind of unspoken, I'm going to do what they say. What can I do to get my players on board with my fellow players, to get on board with something that's going to be gratifying for me and also rewarding for them?
Totally. I mean, I think that both Stras and Dana had it right, like with your first things that you said. And I mean, like Dan Savage says, use your words. Just like, talk to people directly. Like you're sitting down, you're all at the table, and you're about to play Monster Hearts, and you've created the most emo ghost character you can possibly make. You're super sad. You just died yesterday in a car crash because your boyfriend, was drunk or something terrible. And, you want everybody to, like, highlight your sadness. And so you just go around the table and you're like, hey, everybody, I'm playing this super sad ghost, but I'm not sad about that personally. What I'd really like is for you to all make this as sad as possible for me. Kind of like what Dana just said about, like, how you just asked for, the GM to make it terrible for you, or just lay it on thick, and just ask people. And you can say that at first, but don't stop at just once. Continue to ask, because people don't always hear the first time. So like when you're playing with the other characters, like say I'm in a scene with my werewolf friend, and my werewolf friend is just kind of being like angsty and blah and whatever, and I'll be like, hey, remember at the beginning of the game when I was like, make it sad for me? You can totally lash out at me right now. Check out on your sheet. You have this thing you can do. Like, just totally do it at me. And they'll go, oh, yeah, awesome. And then you've helped them out of character create a scene for both you and that person that is something that you wanted. So, ask for what you want. Use your words. I think that's probably the number one meta technique, regardless of what game you're sitting down to play.
Megan, did you have something?
Yeah, the other thing is look, we're all players in a sandbox. We're essentially like kids. Everybody's got their special shiny toy, okay? Whether it's a need or a want or a thing they have, whatever it is, you show off that special shiny toy to everybody else, the GM and the other players. What they decide to do with it, maybe they'll break it and see what happens to you. Maybe they'll share it with you. But if you don't take that and, like, show it to everybody and make it important enough for them to want it and to want to do something with it, then I mean, that's one of the biggest ways to telegraph something, is to really use your words, but also show it off. Show it off in the mechanics. Show it off in the gameplay, in the scene. If you make the scene about this want or this need or this thing, it makes the game go in a direction. We're all improvising these scenes, so putting the detail in the delivery is how we play with each other's toys in the sandbox, or break them. I think both are good.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. I won't talk. Go.
Okay, I just talked, but that's a great point. I think that if you want something to happen to your favorite, most beautiful car, your character's favorite car, keep mentioning that car in every scene you're in. Like, oh, I'm checking on my car. Oh, I'm sitting in my car right now. I'm looking at my car's paint from outside my high school window. Like, just keep putting it in there, and something will happen. And that's obviously telegraphing. Like, I'm telling you, this thing is important. Also, make yourself vulnerable. So, like, constantly say, this is my character's weakness. I want you to push on that. Or this is my character's strength. I want you to push on that too. So both of those are ways to telegraph strength and weakness, right? Is by making yourself vulnerable. Go, Dana.
And even better, remember that you're not the only player there. Everyone else is doing this too. So if somebody shows off their car, go key it.
Yeah.
You know, be the person that like pays attention to these flags that everyone else is throwing up. Don't expect the GM to do it all. Because GM's got their hands full, especially in the con game. They don't know the players. They don't know how to read these people. Help! Go key the car. They'll be grateful in the end. Promise.
So let me follow up with that, Dana. In games that aren't necessarily set up to be PvP, how do you make sure, other than use your words, right? Established, we stipulate that. How can you not be the asshole player who like goes after everybody's throat and still everybody's having fun and you don't turtle them?
So this is an excellent question. Like I said, I think the key is building relationships with the other players. So I'll give you an example. I played a werewolf in the Long Con game in Chicago in October. And the werewolf has a tendency to turn into the I'm just going to beat on people because they go into their darkest self and all of a sudden they're beating on people. Well, at the very outset, I decided that I was the beta to the angel. I was taking orders from the angel. Whatever she said went. And I was just her little dog. And the thing about it was great because I decided that. I didn't know why. And then we found out later on in the fiction that she had smited me with the wrath of God at one point. And I realized that she was in charge, you know. And so now I have this relationship where I have this not only I'm allowing her now to actually have this additional power where she can order me around, she can get me to do stuff, but it sets up this dynamic. And so the key is, again, decide you like someone or decide you have a relationship with someone. I've been somebody's adopted mother. I've been a lover in a game. I've been a rival, but a rival who is also a friend, so we snipe at each other up until the point where one of us got in trouble and then dive into the rescue. All of those things are really great because they build positive relationships that you can explore and make the characters deeper.
Cool, thanks. Any other taking over the GM's responsibility of being all the antagonism, like how you can obviate that?
Talk about it. I think that a lot of people, you don't have to key a car. You can ask a person, like, you can be like, hey, you totally love your car. Why is it special? You know, you seem to spend so much time about it. Where does it come from? Like, if you notice things, that's great. And the other thing is that you can always, the beta comment was really great. A lot of times you can add credence and add sort of threat to things that are on the table by downplaying your own actions in order to allow somebody else to shine for a second. So you can encode that into your character backstory, or you can encode that into sort of your role.
Yeah. There's there's levels of antagonism, right? So like if you're a player in a game, you're probably not going to jump in and be like as bad as the baddest ass that's going to come and kick all of you around. You know, you're not like the epic mega big bad character. You're just another PC with all the other PCs. So think about you know, being antagonistic on that level, as opposed to completely taking over the GM's job, like have little antagonism.
Cool. Anything else on that one? Sorry, I kind of pushed hard there. We can move on. Michael Prescott asked, and I think Dana, you kind of already touched on this one at the outset, but have you ever made a character that was explicitly autobiographical, directly or indirectly? Megan, you want to lead off with that one?
Well, I think that, I mean, my characters aren't necessarily autobiographical, but I come to portraying characters from sort of a Meisner standpoint. Just to get a little actory on you. The Meisner technique, actually, I think it's very akin to seeing some bleed in characters, because what you do is you're embodying a character and you use sort of your internal feelings and internal drives to react to the things that are going on. So while I don't necessarily make characters that are specifically from life events of mine, I do play my characters very much from sort of the gut. And I set them up in a way that allows for me to experience things that affect Megan as well as whoever the character is, if that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning, most of the time when I'm creating a character, I'm creating someone that's going to allow me to explore what it is to be female, and I am female, and what it is to explore sort of this idea of sanity. And that's something that I deal with as well. So in a way, they're all a little bit autobiographical because I'm pulling little bits and pieces of myself to put into them.
I agree. I wonder who can play a character that isn't at all autobiographical and still be interesting. It's hard to not have a touchstone of some kind, right?
I think it's the default if you don't think about who you want the character to be. There are techniques you can use to get away from that. One of the things that I like to do is I like to go Burning Wheel style, where I come up with my high concept for a character. This is especially in trad games. And then I will come up with beliefs and instincts and traits for them, and those may not be things that I personally have, but they're things that I find compelling and maybe even that create internal conflict for that character. And you know, that's a great starting point, because those systems tend to not force you to do those sorts of things, unless you're actually playing Burning Wheel, in which case, good, you're playing Burning Wheel. But so I think that that's a way to come up with a plan for a character that isn't you, if that's your tendency, is to just slip into something that is very much an extension of yourself.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, I think it's hard to get away from yourself. I mean, as an artist and designer, I personally believe that like everything that you create is part of you. You know, that goes for characters and games and everything else there as well. So I mean, I think that all of my characters that I create are very autobiographical. They're all a part of me, and I'm steering them, you know, whatever direction I want them to go, and exploring whatever issues that are going on in my head. So I actually think it's kind of impossible to get away from yourself to that extent. How close you play to home, to use some, I guess, LARPing technology or terminology, I think is up to you, like how close you actually, how autobiographical you actually want to get. Like, I've definitely played characters that are very, very, very much like me, and it's super weird. And I don't like doing it that often because it's very personal and it's very vulnerable. I have to be around people I trust and like in a situation that actually want to tell that story. I don't, you know, like what Stras said earlier, like part of what you're doing when you're role playing is getting away from yourself or trying different things or exploring different personalities. So autobiography, I guess, is not as important in role playing to me. But that's kind of funny. You do project yourself a lot too when you're role playing characters. Like one of my friends, she says that you can kind of tell like what people's sexual preferences are when they're role playing, which I think is super hilarious and kind of true sometimes. Just because a lot of it is like you know, role play psychology, right? So yeah.
Cool. Megan, Strash, did either of you have thoughts to share? You want to move on, or?
There's to answer the original question, have you ever played a character like yourself? There's a tradition that I started where every Halloween I run a Dusk Till Dawn game where it starts when the sun sets and it's supposed to end at the very latest by the time the sun rises. Usually we conk out before then. But we play what's called me games, where you play yourself, and so you take the system and you try and make actually yourself in the system, depending on whatever we're playing that time. So I have actually played myself several times. Like, you don't make a character, you actually play yourself in whatever, Call of Cthulhu or whatever. So yeah, me games. But I think that's all I got for now. Everyone else has pretty much covered it pretty well.
Cool. I did that with Chill once on a Halloween, so.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It's an old game. Marshall Miller asks, and I'm going to lead off with Megan on this. What's the most interesting PC that wasn't played by you, and what made them so interesting?
I think one of my favorites, in the very first game of Apocalypse World that my group ever played, we had a gun lugger. It was played by Todd, who's one of my Gencast co-hosts, and the character was set up to be sort of this like very androgynous, very sort of badass, merc for hire. Whoever could pay her the most money was who was going to get her services, and he kind of stumbled into the game, not really thinking a lot past that concept of she was just going to be sort of this badass chick in the Apocalypse World. And by the end of the game, she had so much going on. She fell in love for the first time with another woman, and explored that entire relationship in juxtaposition to this sort of like very violent, very sort of edge of civilization scenario. And he gave the character a great deal of humanity, a great deal of vulnerability, which was really interesting and cool to see, because she had a lot of experiences over the course of the game that had really nothing to do with being in the setting or being in the skin that she was in. And it was really cool to see that play out. Todd has a lot of characters that are like that, where he really gets to the vulnerability, and they're really cool to see in play. So that's one that I think of.
Cool. Dana, what about you? What's the most interesting PC you've seen played?
So I actually have a pair from our original Apocalypse World game that we did on iPodcast Magic Missile. Caitlin and Yanni played a couple of characters named Big Fucker and Eliza. Big Fucker was a faceless. Eliza was a savvy head. And Eliza especially, there was a lot of themes there, like Megan said, that didn't have anything to do with the Apocalypse World setting. Eliza was very much a person who cared about people deeply and wanted to sort of fix everyone, as a savvy head does. But between the two of them, they also had this sort of awkward relationship that formed gradually over the course of an entire season. And then, they sort of adopted two children whose parents had been killed. And so they were exploring these themes of parenthood and how to deal with these kids. And, these kids growing up quickly in the apocalypse, which is violent. And then when we jumped to season 2, the marriage had become dysfunctional and Big Fucker had become an alcoholic. And so there was all of these like stresses and strains, and they role-played it just really, really well. And I just thoroughly enjoyed seeing the interplay between those two characters and watching their relationship slowly like disintegrate over the course of the second season. It was really cool.
Kira, what about you?
This is a super hard question. I have, I guess, had the benefit of just role-playing with a lot of really amazing people all the time, and playing a lot of games. But I was thinking, I ran a game of Kagamatsu, which is where, it's about a samurai coming into a village that's only populated by women because all the men are off to war, and the women have to figure out different ways to romance the samurai to save them, and it's a fun gender play game that's like an Akira Kurosawa movie. It's like two things I really like. But Jim Crocker was playing the game, my friend Jim, and he made this amazing like Japanese like young girl who was in this village. And I just remember this character so vividly. She was, you know, I think she was a diver, and she would dive and like find all these shells beneath the ocean. And she had this beautiful pearl mirror that she had found. And she always looked wistfully out into the ocean. You'd think that she'd be kind of like, oh, just a cute little mermaid girl. But she was tough. And, you know, she didn't take any gruff from that samurai. And it was just like such a well-rounded character because it kind of took a familiar trope and pushed it to a different place. So it kind of turned the trope on its head and made it more complex and more interesting. And Jim's character descriptions are excellent if you ever get to play a game with Jim Crocker. He has just some beautiful, vivid words, descriptors that he always uses when he role plays characters. So that was a really amazing character.
Very cool. Stras, what about you?
So before I answer, I just wanted to point out that every single example that we've heard from these people involved that juxtaposition, the front with a little bit of behind. So consider that these are memorable characters that everybody's seeing, and think about that when you're making your own. Just a callback. Anyway, I think this is a really hard question, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because when people ask me questions like, what is your favorite sci-fi movie of all time, I have to go by decade because I think there's way too many awesome characters that people have seen. But I'm going to settle on, so basically what I'm going to say is like, genre, you have to kind of pick like, what is the thing that they did that makes them great? Like, what is your favorite funny character that you've seen? Because clearly, you know, that's different from some of the other ones. But I'm actually going to date myself a little bit here. I was in a vampire LARP, of all things. Old school White Wolf, right? And there was a guy who showed up for the better part of a year and a half, and he was playing a NOS, and he never dropped Obfuscate. He was there every time. He would sit down, and he would like when the prince said everybody stand, he would stand up and Obfuscate, and he would perform all of his actions, and he never once interacted with a soul that I saw. And then there was this event. I was actually playing a child character at the time, and I don't remember who frenzied, but somebody smacked me, and he actually decloaked for the first time and started screaming in the middle of the scene because apparently it was one of his character flaws that nobody knew about. But this man was dedicated. Like, he was there, he was playing every time, he was getting his XPs, he was actually interacting, but he was interacting in very subtle fashion. Like, he would collect things that people would leave behind, so like if people would like eat something, he would like take the wrapper and stuff like that. And after a while it just became kind of like a people watching exercise for me, where I watched this guy just do this every single time. And it was kind of super fascinating for me, so dedicated to the character.
That's pretty cool. Stras, I'm going to stay with you, and then we'll go kind of backwards to Megan, Kira, and then Dana. Joanna Pianconstelli asked, how do you get a character concept to hit the ground running once you get into actual play?
Okay. So there's a couple of things that you definitely want. One, you want to provide yourself with a goal, particularly an actionable goal. So like, if you are going to be playing a game, a lot of people make a character and then they wait for the initial scenario, but a lot of times in that character creation process, you want to add like a mission, like if you're looking for your sister or you've been squabbling in town with somebody, it gives you something to immediately interact with and sort of like begin a scene other than sitting. In addition to that, you definitely want to if you want to have a character immediately come to life, figuring out some small tics and maybe like turns of phrase that are familiar to them really helps make you pop and sort of gives you something to do in a scene immediately. Thinking about what sort of scenes you want to see and how you want to frame them, sort of like where your character is best coming out. And the other thing you might want to do is seek conflict because it'll certainly keep you busy all the time. So if you want your character to hit the ground running, find something to maybe not necessarily be uppity about, but definitely have something that is going to give you things to do and immediately sort of dive you into the plot and action. So.
Cool. Megan, what about you?
Make a big move. You know, every character has a want or a need, maybe you don't even know it, but as soon as that scene starts, make a big move. Because the worst thing that can happen is you do it, and then, you know, it spurs some action one way or another. Or if it's not a big move, make a big choice. Maybe that character, you know, is like Stras was saying, has a mission, has a goal, wants to get something done. If you start with action, you're going to continue to create action for your character to do. If you kind of slide in the background, you're not going to get that need or that goal met. So just dive right in.
Kira, what about you? How do you hit the ground running?
Well, I'm a very visual person, so I like to kind of imagine my character in like their opening scene in a movie or TV show. Like, where are they? What are they doing? What are they wearing? What's their theme music going on in their head? Or what's their overall theme? Like, how can I showcase my character in about a sentence, right? I'm doing this thing, wearing these sad clothes because I'm an Avenger, and I'm seeking, you know, the revenge of my loved one or whatever. Like, just in like a second. Like, this is who I am, what I look like, and what I'm about to do, and what I'm all about. And then after, like, I say that out loud to the table, and then so I describe all that stuff. It takes about a minute tops. And then I talk to someone next to me, and I say, I see you walking down the street, and I say something that my character would say. Like, I instantly am in my character's head, and I say, you know, something about, like, how lonely I am because it's a dark, cloudy day, and, you know, I take a drag off my cigarette. Instantly, I know what type of character I am, and that person does, too, and they know how to respond to me. So then you're having a scene. So I think that's a good way that I get myself like in a character and start the ground running.
That's great, Kira. Dana, what about you?
What they said.
Listen, I gave you ample warning, Dana, that you were going to have to be last. So you got a trump. Come on.
Oh, well,
I mean, two examples for everything else.
To extend what Kira said, like I said, I'm a big fan of picking something about another character to highlight or connect to. So even if you're not quite sure what you want to do and you don't have any big action plans, although you should, because they were right about that, but if you don't, go be in somebody else's story. You know, I mean, at the very least, it's going to give you more screen time, and then maybe you can figure out what it is you want to do.
Oh, can I add one last thing?
Go for it.
This might sound a little cheesy, but if you have a prop, it doesn't have to be like a big ornate thing. You know, if you've just got something you hold in your hand, or like, you know, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu Turn of the Century and you have a meerschaum pipe that you carry around that your character has, that pipe is going to drive action because it says so much about your character. Like right now I'm playing Sagas of the Icelanders. When we started the game, I had a hank of yarn that I had to wind, and my character is all about like creating things, and so every time I sit down, I'm knitting. And my character, like, that's part of what she does. That's part of who she is, part of how I hold myself. When I played the first game of Apocalypse World, I played a hocus, and I decided that my religion was going to be based on a 1980s Girl Scout handbook that I had found in the wasteland. So I had that book, and throughout the game, I was able to like tear pages out of it and write things in it, and it was there, and the other characters could see that thing that I had. That's a great way. Like, if you don't know exactly what you're doing when you jump in that first thing, if you've got something there that represents you, everybody else is going to start thinking of things that means. So that's another thing.
Props are great. I will also admit that we have started to costume our tabletop role-playing games. You know, just like wearing capes or flight jackets or more, like, you know, sunglasses, or like, you know, having that bottle of whiskey nearby, you know, whatever it is. That stuff is really fun, and it helps you get in a character, and everybody has a great time with it. So.
Yeah, Dana, I know that I podcast Magic Missly. You all have been doing that quite a bit lately. I see some of the pictures you're posting.
There might be some pictures. From an old Baron Munchausen game, we all dressed up, and then for Scup, geez, you should check out some of those pictures. They're posted to my old G Plus account, but I could probably repost them if people are interested. I'll do that. Yeah, it's fun.
Dana, I'll stick with you, so
Okay.
you don't have to to point to everyone else. And we're getting near the end here, so I like this question here to kind of be our ender. Have you? This comes from Nat Barmore. Have you ever played a character that you disliked or even hated? Why and how did you play them?
You know, I was hoping you wouldn't do this one because no, no, I don't. It doesn't. I don't get any personal reward from that. I know other people who do. I know other people who love playing reprehensible characters. Will in our group loves playing reprehensible characters, almost exclusively. He just loves playing bad guys. But I can't bring myself to do it because. But I've definitely had characters that have disappointed me. Maybe I can just do this like a political debate. I'll turn this into a talking point I wanted to answer.
Go for it.
Let your characters do things that will disappoint you. Let your characters do unexpected things. I know this was a different question that we're not getting to. The character I was talking about where I was just like use and abuse me, Grace, the Skinner. She was sex trafficked. She was abused. She was locked in a room for a month. Another character, an NPC, finally took pity on her, helped her a little bit. She was about to be tortured by the man who basically owned her. And the other character stepped in just at the last second. And Grace had an opportunity then to basically allow this guy to take the punishment she was going to get, which would probably result in his death, and did, in fact. Or help and maybe succeed, probably even overpower him because there was 2-on-1 at that point. And I really wanted her to help, but she ran out. She walked out. And that I was disappointed, and I learned a thing that day, and I learned a thing about myself too, to be honest with you. But that's one of the most reprehensible things I've ever had a character do. I can't play a character who's just grosses me out and is disgusting and makes me angry. I mean, as a GM, sure, because you have to. Like Kira was saying, you have games like Misspent Youth or whatever else like that, or you had to play a sexist, racist, horrible human being. But no, I can't.
Okay.
Not as a player. Not
Fair.
for like a whole campaign.
All right. Kira, what about you?
Yeah, I had to think about that because I normally like playing characters that I like. Even if they have weaknesses or flaws, right? Because that's what makes characters interesting. They're not like perfect. But I did actually play a character that I didn't like once. It was a vampire character. It was in a Vampire the Requiem tabletop game. And I was playing a Circle of the Crone character, and she was a vampire. Kind of like a vampire is supposed to be, like just kind of a monster. She wasn't like necessarily like a villainous bad guy type of vampire, but she was just really weak and pitiful, like all the time. Like she was the saddest kind of villain. I just felt sorry for her all the time. I'm like, I'm gonna do this other sad thing. That's because vampire to me is about playing monsters. And you want to kind of explore what is it to be a monster, or what is it to be human, and that kind of thing. So I think that you kind of, to a certain extent, if you're playing a monster, you have to think about things that you don't like, things that are monstrous. So I focused on that a lot, and I really didn't like her. She became more. She was redeemed in the end. She became more human. But she started out like she would just make all these horrible decisions and be really like weak and pitiful all the time. I don't like. I don't know. That's it was a really sad thing to do.
Okay, Megan, when I come to you, I'll alter this in case we end up in a kind of a dead end here. Have you ever played a character that you disliked or even hated? Alternatively, if the answer is no, then Michael Prescott asked the question, which Dana kind of led into: has one of your characters ever surprised you? So liked, disliked, hated, or surprised you?
I can combine both in one. So my answer to this question was I had played a character in a game of Dogs in the Vineyard, which was already a little difficult for me to get into, just because the setting of that game, as far as being a woman in it, is very, like, to me it makes me angry. And but I try, like, when I came up with this character, I came up with a character who was a dog, and she was trying to stay a dog for as long as she possibly could because she was terrified of becoming pregnant, because she had seen, women have, babies and have horrible things happen to them just through the course of childbirth. And so her fear was she was going to be married off and become sort of a broodmare. And I didn't like playing her, because I played her and playing the setting made me angry, and playing her because she was coming at this from like a point of desperation, that made me angry, and her interactions with people, it wasn't satisfying to me. But at the same time, I did learn a few things about, I learned things from playing that character that did disappoint me and that I didn't like playing. My takeaway from that game was you can be involved in a situation with a character you don't like or that does disappoint you, that genuinely can affect you as a person, and sort of move forward through that experience. I was able to identify the things in the game that made me upset, and the things in the character that made me disappointed, and I was still able to take something away from it. But yeah, that was the situation. I was both squicked out and disappointed at the same time.
Cool. Thanks, Megan. That's great. Stras, what about you?
So, I think ultimately the reason we play any of these games is, to have fun. I know some people that would disagree, but in general. So if you truly don't like a character and you're not having a good time, then I usually just tell people, like, hey guys, I'm not having a good time. Can I switch up my character? Or I'm just going to check out. No downer to you. But that said, there are certainly characters, we talked about this earlier, where we talked about introducing elements that are maybe not comfortable or not terribly awesome. So I think I don't think I've ever played a character that I've disliked all the way through. Superficially, particularly as Dana mentioned, when you're a GM, you have to play villains and stuff like that, so that's fine. But you're not deeply invested in these characters. And I think that if you're ever playing a character that has a lot of problems, by creating them, you look for things that you can relate to, maybe even to help you bridge to them to sort of understand them a little bit. So a lot of times, you end up not hating them entirely. Maybe there's some portion of them you do like. In terms of surprise, I've had, I guess you'll call it reverse bleed. I don't know what to call it. I've had moments where I've been in a situation where I know how I would react, and I can feel a completely different set of emotions coming from my character, and I know that they'll do something that I would never do in a million years. So I've had characters be in a scene where I knew exactly what they had to do, and it was not something that I would have predicted them or myself ever doing, before that moment. So definitely have had that sort of thing happen. So.
Yeah, me too. I had a chopper who went off on someone because 4 guards showed up. His logic was, oh, she's afraid of me because there are 4 guards. And I would never have thought that. I would have thought, shit, I need to get away.
Yes.
It was an interesting moment. Well, we have thank you all of you for all 4 of you for giving us your time and talking to us about how to make awesome player characters. Thank you, Dana, Kira, Megan, and Stras, for giving us your time and your advice. And this was Indie Plus Pound Game Night, how to create interesting characters. Thank you, and please feel free to give us feedback on our Google Plus page or on the YouTube channel. Have an excellent night.